Hello, I'm Gwyneth Jones of the Translators studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation. In this video, I interview Catharine Cellier-Smart, a well-known French to English translator. Catharine tells the story of how her translation career developed out of a degree in European Studies. She talks about her work as a certified translator and how to become a sworn translator in France. We also discuss diversification into voiceover services and travel writing, and how she's used social media and blogging to support her translation business. Translators, I give you Catharine Cellier-Smart. Catharine, you were born in London and now you're a professional translator living on the Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean. Can you tell us, how do you get from A to B?
Through sea. Sorry about the pun. I live on an island surrounded by sea. So I was born and brought up in London, as you say, and I went to Wolverhampton. I did a degree in European Studies, a 4-year degree. Third year abroad, I was supposed to go to Aix-en-Provence because I studied French as part of that degree, but it wasn't a language degree. Language was just one component of the degree. So I came to Reunion for my third year abroad in 1990. I felt at home. I spent a year here, did my dissertation, went back to the UK to finish my degree, and then graduated in 92. I was barely 22, and you know, when you're 22, you're not particularly serious about doing serious things. And I thought, you know, I enjoyed it in Reunion. I know I can earn a living from teaching and training and perhaps doing some translating and interpreting. And so I moved back to Reunion in 1992 for a year or two. That was, of course, 30 years ago. Basically, what happened is that I realized I didn't really have the patience for teaching. Mm-hmm. The market in Reunion wasn't mature enough for there to be a lot of demand for translating and interpreting. So I did some, but I couldn't really make a living of it. So I ended up working in business. I was an employee for about 15 years. After a few years, I did an MBA in evening classes. Then my husband got a job posting abroad in Asia. So I left my work in Reunion to move to Seoul, South Korea. And after 3 years in Asia, when we returned to Reunion, I said to myself, it's now or never. This is really the opportunity to do what you've always wanted to do, something that had always been at the back of my mind, which is to set up my own translation business. 11 years ago, I set up my company. The time I'd spent in Asia had left me with time to research what I was going to need to do to set up a business in France, but also to set up a business as a freelance translator. And I knew that I would need probably about 3 years to make it a going concern. In the end, it took 2 years. But just as a side note, for those that don't know Reunion Island, so it's a French overseas department in the Indian Ocean. So it's technically part of France. There's euros. There's the same legal health school system as in mainland France. People may know Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guyana, even Mayotte, which have the same status now.
And so were you, when you set this business up, were you targeting clients on the Reunion?
So initially I was working about half and half with agencies and direct clients. So yes, I was targeting direct clients, but also I knew that to make a living, I wasn't necessarily straight away going to walk into enough work to make it a going concern. So I was half and half agencies and direct clients. And as the years have gone by, the part of agency work has dropped. So I would say that roughly today I'm maybe about 20-25% work with boutique agencies, and the rest is mainly with direct clients.
And are most of these located on Reunion? I'm never sure. Is it the Reunion or Reunion?
It's Reunion.
Just Reunion.
Yeah, just Reunion, yeah.
Are the majority of these located on Reunion, or are they located in France or in other countries?
Most of them are located in Reunion. So there are some who are located in mainland France or in Europe. To be honest, I'm not terribly keen with working with clients outside of the European Union because I've had a few non-payment scares. That's always something to bear in mind when you're looking to work with direct clients. But for example, I'm a member of the French SFT, Translators organization, and I have direct clients in mainland France who found me due to my specializations.
And so thinking, you said that the agencies dropped and the direct clients grew. I'm assuming that was a deliberate decision on your part. How did you build up your client base?
Living as I do on a relatively small island, it's a lot of word of mouth. So when I say relatively small, we're talking about an island that's the size of Luxembourg, with a population of about 880,000 people. It doesn't happen. You can't sort of click your fingers and sort of walk into to a lot of work, I would say, with direct clients. But it's a case of knowing what your clients need, and your clients and your potential clients knowing that you're there to provide a solution for their language needs, basically.
And I know that one of the services that you offer is certified translation. How do you become a certified translator?
So certified, being a sworn translator varies from country to country. So I'm a sworn translator in France. So the process in France is that you apply to the jurisdiction of where you live. So you have to apply with a certain number of documents about who you are, but also about your translation experience. You then go through a process. I had an interview with one of the vice presidents of the court. I had what the French call an enquête de moralité, which is basically a character check from the police. And then you just have to cross your fingers and wait. It's quite a long process. You have in France, in any case, you have to apply before the 1st of March, and you will only get a reply at the end of the year. And then it's for the following year. And when you start out, you're what they call a probationer. You're on probation for, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 years. And then you can apply to renew, and the renewal needs to be done every 5 years. So I was actually, the first time I applied, I was rejected, but I was told that it was nothing personal and that I had every reason to reapply for the following year, which is what I did, and I got accepted I got accepted the year after. Bearing in mind that I think it really varies from what I've been talking to colleagues in mainland France. It really seems to vary from place to place, and I've heard of colleagues who've applied for 6, 7, 8 years, 8 consecutive years without ever being accepted.
And so there's no specific qualification requirement that you have to meet?
No, you don't have to pass an exam, but you do have to provide them with proof of your that you have experience with translation. I sent them a certain number of documents about my training, and they came back to me, for example, and asked me to send a list of translations that I had done. So, yeah.
Invoices and things like that can be used for proof as well, I should imagine.
Yes, that's not what I sent to them, but I kept track of sort of I didn't necessarily send client names, but sort of so and so many thousand words done for such and such a type of client. But it really, as I say, it's a process that varies from country to country and even from jurisdiction to jurisdiction within France. But there is no exam.
It's really interesting to hear because it's so different to the process in Spain, for instance. I mean, for starters, in Spain, I don't think you can just be certified to be a translator. It's got to be a translator and interpreter. There's not an option for one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Are you certified to interpret as well, or is it only for translation?
So I could have applied to be a sworn translator and interpreter. You can choose. And I chose only to be a certified translator. I chose not to be a certified interpreter, bearing in mind that there have been several occasions, I would say on average, maybe about once a year in the 8 years that I've been a sworn translator, there have been occasions when I will get contacted by the courts or other official bodies, and they'll say, well, we need an interpreter and you're the only person available. We know that you're not an interpreter, but if you can come in, and you sort of get sworn in on an ad hoc basis. So even though I'm not officially a sworn interpreter, if there's a need, I'd say I've done almost as much sworn interpreting work as I have done sworn translation work for the courts.
And so are you certified to translate only into English, or are you certified to translate in both directions?
In France, you are supposed to work in both directions in theory. In practice, when it actually boils down to it, if I'm contacted by the courts and they ask me to translate into French, I will gently, carefully explain to them that it'd be preferable for a French native speaker to do it, and I will recommend a colleague who can do it. And the same goes for translations for perhaps for private individuals. If it's a diploma, a birth certificate, a driving license, yes, I will do it into French. But for something that's more complicated, a contract, I won't do it into French.
Mm-hmm. So you just say no, and they can go on and hopefully find someone who is equally as ethical.
I never just say no. I will say, I can't for this reason, but here are the details of somebody who can do it for you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I guess the final question I'd ask you, well, it's a joint question. Is it a lucrative thing to be? And do you enjoy doing certified translations?
So I would say more or less about a third of my income is from certified translations. So what the courts need is maybe it's only a handful of times a year, but the fact of being a sworn translator means that you can do certified translations for people who need the translation. So that is where you're getting your income. So this can range from lawyers' firms, it can be companies that need their bylaws or company registrations translated, or it can just be private individuals who need diplomas, civil status documents, and driving licenses translated. It can be interesting because I live on an island. By and large, most of the clients, I will say, the clients will send me a scanned copy to work from, but I do need to see the original. So they will come to pick up the translation from where I live, from my home office, and it's a chance to meet people. And I've sometimes had some very interesting discussions, just with somebody who's come to pick up a driving license translation.
Yeah, the reason why they need to get, to go through the hassle and the expense of getting this certified document. Yeah,
you often meet people who are on crossroads in their lives because they're, maybe they're heading off to study abroad, or they've come to reunion after having lived abroad, and it's some very interesting stories.
The opportunity to diversify is a great opportunity that's open to freelance translators, and I know that you've taken advantage to that. When I was stalking you through your LinkedIn profile before this interview, I saw a range of services: voiceover, travel writing, and a job that I'd never heard of before, cross-cultural trainer. Can you tell us a bit about how you got into these different services and what the jobs involve?
They're all quite different, but they also have something that runs it. The fact of language, they're all language adjacent, I would say. That's something that runs through all three of them. The other thing that runs through all three of them is the fact that often it's been a case of being in the right place at the right time, and having been approached to for example, the cross-cultural training. I have quite a strong online presence, and when a company that specializes in international cross-cultural training contacted me about doing cross-cultural training for somebody that was going to be moving to Reunion for professional purposes, they researched and found me. So that's how I went into cross-cultural training, which is not something that I do very frequently, but it was a very interesting chance to stop and think and sort of take a sort of an outside look at what it meant to be bicultural and living in another culture. In terms of voiceover work, again, it's often been a case of being in the right place at the right time, having been asked to do voiceover work. I don't have specific training, but all my voiceover work has been done in professional studios with professional sound technicians. So I've been able to receive a lot of advice about voiceover work. That's been a great help. One thing that I would say you have to watch out for if you're contacted for voiceover work is if you're going to be working or reading a text that's being translated into your native language, you need to check who has it been written directly in your native language, or has it been translated? And if it's been translated, who has translated it? When I started out doing voiceover work, I had a couple of bad, not to say nasty, surprises when I was supposed to be reading a text that had been translated by a non-native speaker. So that is something to watch out for. And then the travel writing, again, right place, right time. Also, strong online presence. Somebody I was actually already in contact with, who approached me about a contract for travel writing. And it's a skill that I had been honing for several years through travel blogging. So I have two blogs. I have a professional blog and a travel blog, about travels that I've done, but also where I try to write about Reunion from a traveler's point of view. It's very important when you're a translator. Yes, you need source language skills, but you especially need target language writing skills. And blogging is a good way. It's not the only way, but it's a good way to hone those target language writing skills.
So I'm thinking I'm going to go back across these three jobs, and I'm going to ask you for a little more detail. Well, regarding the cross-cultural trainer, which, as I said, I didn't even know that existed, although it's logical to me that it would. So when someone calls you up and says, can you help this person to become assimilated within the culture of Reunion, how do you actually do this? Do you create, I'm imagining like a film where you're there lecturing, you've got this person sitting at the table and you're saying, this is what you must say at the shop. And, this is, if there's a queue of people, this is how you get in line. Is that what it looks like? Do you have to prepare for this, or is it more of a conversational thing, as a support, like a coaching thing?
I definitely had to prepare. And so the advantage of having been approached by an international company, so they didn't know anything about Reunion. They didn't have anybody that could do any training about Reunion, but they are used to doing cross-cultural training for almost every country in the world. Mm-hmm. So they had a sort of not exactly a template, but they definitely had guidelines on saying, well, we want you to concentrate on this aspect and this aspect and this aspect. Remember to talk about X, Y, Z, but you don't need to talk about A, B, C for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So I had to prepare something, and then it's work that can be done in person, but in my case was done online.
Okay, and so you're talking a bit like we are now, and
exactly
basically teaching someone.
Yeah.
It sounds like an interesting work. And regarding the voiceover, if anyone's listening and they're interested in getting into that, whilst you didn't train, do you think that it could be interesting to train? Would you consider training in voiceover?
Definitely. I think one of the so living where I do, it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages is being far away from a number of training possibilities. So even though more and more training possibilities are available online, there is voiceover training exists, but me personally, it's not something I would want to do online. It's something I would want to do in person. So I would recommend, if you live anywhere where you can go and do in-person voiceover training, I would definitely recommend doing it. But again, it boils down a little bit like translation. It's the great debate. Do you need a degree or qualification in language or translation to be a translator? When the French Translators Association did a survey a few years ago, very interesting results, because about half the SFT members had studied translation and become translators through that route, and about half had come into translation, a bit like myself, had come into translation from another type of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the voiceover specifically, perhaps it's about your voice. If you've got the voice they want, then they're not going to worry about the training. I wonder though, I bet it would help with self-confidence and things like that as well, just learning how to control your voice. That sounds interesting to me anyway. And then the travel writing, you said you knew somebody who connected you. Did you have to do any kind of test or anything like that? Because you've written for Lonely Planet and travel guides like that, haven't you?
So far, I've written for Insight Guides.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this is going back a few years when I first started writing for Insight Guides. I don't think I had to do some sort of test. Maybe I sent links to my blogs or something. But yes, I know there are situations. I know that, for example, if you want to write for Lonely Planet, you have to. It's not exactly a test, but you have to provide proof of how you can write and give examples.
And in terms of income, do all of these jobs pay approximately the same, or is one of these jobs more lucrative than the others?
The travel writing is not lucrative. When I've done it, it's the travel writing I've done so far. When I've sort of worked out what I've been earning from it, it's probably about half of what I would earn from translation, given the amount of time I've had to spend doing it. So it's probably for that, it's probably been more a case of intellectual stimulation and interest, and also in my case, I have a passion about. There's very little English language information about Reunion Island out there. It's a very common complaint. And so maybe it's just my way of helping people to know more about this amazing place where I live, which is also called France's best kept secret. But maybe I shouldn't be writing about Reunion. Maybe I should. The island should just stay a secret. In terms of income for voiceover work and for the cross-cultural training, I would say it's a similar income to translation work. But it's not a major source of income for me, and it's not something particularly that I have sought to do more of. I mean, I could set my own recording studio up here and do voiceover work for people all over the world, but maybe I feel that I need more training to do that. As I say, these are language adjacent type of work. It's things that I very much have enjoyed doing, but for me, it's not work that I'm thinking of diversifying into and doing full time.
It's interesting. I think it's fun to do different things. It's good. It's good for your own creativity and motivation. I find just changing, like us talking here today, it's a break from the routine.
Exactly.
I'd like to move on now and talk a little bit about your social media presence, because it's something, or from where I'm sitting, it's certainly something that you're known for. And you've already said that your online presence has contributed to your success in finding all of these different types of work, and also your success with direct clients. Looking at your Twitter account, you've got 7,500 followers and over 30,000 tweets. And so my question, how much of this is a labor of love and how much of it is something else?
Oh, vast question. So the Twitter account is something I think I created about 13 years ago when I was still living in South Korea. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I spent some of the time in South Korea when I knew that I was going to be moving back to Reunion. I spent time researching setting up a company in France, and specifically in Reunion, and also about setting up a translation company. And I started subscribing to blogs and reading articles, and also I had just started using Twitter. And they say that everybody has a social media of preference, and Twitter for some reason has always been my social media of preference. And I think it was a combination of, well, I've found interesting information, and hey, I enjoy Twitter, so why not share that information on Twitter for more people to know about. So I think it really all started from there. I personally I use what they call an RSS reader, and I was just checking this morning. I have 335 subscriptions to different news sources. So some of those are personal, some of them are, for example, blogs that are no longer active, but they're still in the RSS reader because they have articles from a few years ago, but it can still be useful. But yes, it's maybe I spend maybe 30 minutes every morning sort of looking at blogs and news articles, and thinking to myself, well, is that of interest, and can that be of interest to other people?
And so it's a combination of the fact that you would already be looking at this anyway because you're interested to read it, and so then it's not so hard to then start sharing it. And
exactly.
What about the other social media platforms? Do you dedicate any significant time to any of the others apart from Twitter?
So I have a presence I have a professional page on Facebook. On LinkedIn, I have obviously a personal profile, but I also have a professional page on LinkedIn. Also on YouTube. So YouTube was actually a means of sharing voiceover work that I do originally. And then also during the pandemic, I started with a professional Instagram presence. I would say that I dedicate less time to those platforms. But for example, I mean, the audience for the audience for LinkedIn or for Facebook is not going to be the same as Twitter. Twitter for me is somewhere where I hang out with other translators. That's not necessarily something that I do on the other social media platforms, and that's something to bear in mind when you're sharing content. So content that I will, the content that I was talking about earlier on, I will share different content on different platforms. They do say that you need to choose one platform and dedicate yourself to that platform. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, for example, I don't know how many people remember, is it Google Plus? If you had dedicated a lot of time to Google Plus, well, Google pulled the plug.
That's
so
true,
all
yeah.
that time, yeah.
All your eggs in one basket.
Exactly, yeah. Also, the colleague Nikki Graham, who found herself through no fault of her own, who found herself locked out of her Twitter account. She had as many followers as I did, and years and years of work building a community and sharing information that was, as far as I know, lost. So even if you're less active on social media, on other social media platforms, I think it's good to have a foot in the door. But above all, I would say that when you're on a social media platform, think about why you're there, what you want to do there, and who you want to see your content.
And so then what are you getting out of all of this? I mean, it's a massive time investment that you've made. What is coming back to you from that investment?
It goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier on. Well, I would be reading articles and information anyway. So I may as well just, if I think it's going to be of interest to somebody else, I may as well just share it. When it comes to Twitter, I've met people on Twitter and interacted with people and colleagues and other people that I would never have met otherwise. And then also the first translation conference that I ever went to, it was a relatively small conference as they go. I think it was maybe about 140 people. Mm-hmm. I'd been active professionally on social networks for about 4 years at the time. I went to the conference not knowing a single person, but literally as soon as I walked in the door, I knew half of the people who were there, and about half, not necessarily the same half, knew me simply because of social media presence.
Yeah.
So that's something to bear in mind. I think also maybe subconsciously it comes from, I live on a fairly remote island. There's only a handful of other translators here. As far as I know, I'm the only translator on the island who works full-time from French to English. The other translators, they work with English to French or other language combinations. So for me, it's a bit of, maybe there's also, it's my water cooler. Mm-hmm. So it's a way of meeting other colleagues and yeah.
Well, I'm going to share all of these links to all of your profiles in the show notes, so anyone who's watching can connect with you at the social media water cooler. And moving on now to your blogging. As a blogger, you're particularly known for your monthly roundups, where you put a summary of not just translation, anything related to the world of languages, really, that might be interested to translators and writers. Your archives go right back to 2011. And I'd be interested to know what degree of impact you think that the blogging has had on the success of your business and on your status within the translation community.
So as you say here, the blog goes back about 10 years. The travel blog that I talked about earlier on got to a point where I was it's a bit the same for Twitter, because I actually have several Twitter accounts, but I realized that I didn't want to talk on my travel blog about translation issues or interesting language books that I'd read or something. So I realized that I realized that I wanted to separate the two blogs, mm-hmm. bearing in mind that I made a more or less conscious decision that it was going to be a blog aimed at other translators and other people interested in language. And I think that, again, it goes back to what I was saying about social media. When you set up a blog, you really need to think about who you're writing for and why you're writing. In my case, both travel and professional blogs, it's a case of almost forcing myself to write regularly, to hone those language skills, writing in my native language, but not translating into my native language. Sort of not being tied down, as it were, with a source language.
And do you think that it's generated business directly for you, or would you say it's more of a passion project?
It has generated some business, but as I say, it's not a blog that's directed at clients.
Yes.
And that's a conscious decision. So work that it has generated has been agency owners and other colleagues, bearing in mind that other colleagues are a source of work. Your recommendations from other colleagues. So that's not something to be neglected at all.
And in terms, do you monitor the traffic and things? Do you get more traffic mm-hmm. through the translation blog or the travel writing blog?
Actually, through the translation blog. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot more people who have subscribed to the translation blog.
Mm-hmm. I do think that if people interested in some kind of content writing, the blog is also there as, if someone says, have you written, show me examples of your writing, and you can say, well, it's mm-hmm. right here on this successful blog that I'm running.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just to finish up this conversation, I want to ask you the question that I ask everybody I interview, which is, what would be your message for early career translators?
I don't have one single message. I have several messages in no particular order. But for me, I've always found it important to think of yourself as a business owner and not just a freelance translator. It really is a question of mindset. Maybe it's a cliche to say it, but I think it's very important to, first and foremost, think of yourself as somebody who's running a business. Another point I would say is to join a Translators Association. So, as I was saying earlier, I'm a member of the SFT. I have very, very rarely been able to attend any of their events or even their training courses in person. I was able to do it occasionally during COVID, but the wealth of information that I got from the forum has really, really helped me an enormous amount. So that's something to bear in mind. As there's lots of advantages to being in a Translators Association, but for me, that's definitely one of them. I would say also, by all means, when you're starting out, create your own website, for example, or maybe create your own logo. But as soon as you have the means, reinvest money in your business, pay to have your website professionally done. Maybe pay a colleague to get it translated into your source languages. So that's something else to bear in mind. I have a regret that I didn't. Again, this goes back to when you're sort of starting out. You tend to do things small, but I have a regret, for example, that I didn't invest in translation management software. Company management software.
Oh, okay.
When I was starting out. So that's something now, if I wanted to have accurate, precise statistics on my clients and on the work, etc., I can get that information, but not as easily if I'd been using some sort of translation company management software. So that's also something to bear in mind. Another point is to never stop learning. I find that, so in our line of work, we have an advantage and we have a disadvantage, is that we don't necessarily have a lot of visibility with our work, and it can be difficult to set aside time to do CPD. You might say to yourself, well, there's such and such course that I can attend in person or online on such and such a date. But you then find yourself with very important and or urgent project that you need to work on. So that it's not always easy, but do keep track of your learning, of your CPD, what you've done. And also I have another list, which is what I call my bucket list of CPD of courses that I would like to do.
Well, that's all excellent advice, and I thoroughly agree with everything you've just said. So I'd like to thank you very much for coming to talk to me today and for sharing so much information so generously. Thank you very much, Catharine.
Thank you, Gwen.
I hope you enjoyed this interview from the Translators Studio. We specialise in teaching the art of translation and in preparing translators for certification through the Diptrans exam. If you like our content, please let us know by clicking on the subscribe button. See you in the next video.